If you've ever spent any time watching trumpet videos on YouTube, you've likely come across trumpet players playing rotary trumpets. Upon seeing these instruments, you might think to yourself, these look like trumpets, but they're a bit different. What are all these extra keys for? Why would they play those instead of regular trumpets? If you've ever found yourself asking questions like this, stick around. In this video, we're going to be covering rotary trumpets, why you would use them, and what they sound like. Hello and welcome to this video. If we're meeting for the first time, my name is Ryan Beach, and I am the principal trumpet with the Alabama Symphony Orchestra, and I host a podcast called That's Not Spit, It's Condensation. The wonderful people over at Houghton Horns were kind enough to send me over a B-flat and a C Ricco Kühn rotary trumpet. I've been playing these horns for a few weeks now, and I've really been enjoying getting used to them and kind of learning my way around them, and I wanted to share some of my experience with you and to show you a little bit of what they sound like. So I have a secret that I want to share with you, but I'm not really that excited to share. I'm a little bit embarrassed that I have to admit this, so I'd like you to come a little closer so I don't have to say it that loud. A little closer, a little closer. Perfect. I don't know that much about rotary trumpets. This is actually true. In the Alabama Symphony Orchestra, we don't use rotaries for any of that kind of repertoire that you would normally think to use it on. We just stick with our piston trumpets because that's what we're used to. In the past, when I've used rotaries, I just did it because I was told that's what you did on that kind of music of Brahms or Beethoven, but I never understood why we used it on that kind of music. Over the years of producing my podcast, I've been able to develop some relationships with some really fine trumpet players, and so in this case, to help me learn more about rotary trumpets, I reached out to my friend Micah Wilkinson. Micah is currently the principal trumpet with the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra, and he and I hopped on a Zoom call where he just shared so much great information about rotary trumpets and mouthpieces and sound and different types of makers. I just learned so much from this conversation. I'm excited to share it with you. Before we get into my interview with Micah, if you find this video helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would support Houghton Horns and me by giving this video a like and subscribing to their YouTube channel. It really does make a difference, and it helps YouTube know that they should show this video to more people who are interested in this kind of thing. The first thing I wanted Micah to do was just to talk a little bit about when we would use rotary trumpets in the orchestra. Then I wanted him to talk a little bit about the differences between piston trumpets and rotary trumpets, and then to actually talk a little bit about the differences amongst rotary trumpets themselves.
So a German rotary trumpet is a great tool in the United States for when we play the music of Brahms and Beethoven and Schumann and Wagner in the United States, and it's becoming a very commonly used tool for that. So an American trumpet has a more focused, compact, together sound, right? And it penetrates. It's focused. It's direct. And a rotary trumpet sound is rounder in the sense that it's sort of open-ended, and it's a little bit harder to hear the sort of focused middle on a rotary trumpet. And the articulation is different. On a piston trumpet, you've got very clear fronts, and on a rotary trumpet, there's a little bit more bloom in the way that the sound is produced. You know, it's a overgeneralization, but you could basically say that you have sort of an Austrian or Southern Germany style of instrument building, which a Breselmeyer mouthpiece is very well suited for, which is a lighter instrument usually, and very clear and transparent. You know, famous makers are Lechner and Schagel. Those are probably the most well-known, and Dovides from Munich is another great one. And then as you go to other, more northern, then you get instruments that are a little heavier and that have a little bit more density to the sound. And those are ones where perhaps a different mouthpiece is useful, like a JK or maybe even a standard mouthpiece. And some of those makers would be Ricco, Kühn, Monke, Weimann. Those are some of the sort of classic and modern makers. Many more, but those are just a few.
Just like on a piston trumpet, the mouthpiece you choose to use can have a big effect on how easy it is to produce a great sound on a rotary trumpet. I used to have a mouthpiece by a maker named Breselmeyer, but I ended up selling that a little while back, so all I had available to me on this video was just my regular mouthpiece that I play all the time. This ended up not being a problem though, as Micah said this during our interview as well.
On some of the more northern German or East German makers, like Ricco Kühn, the Breselmeyer didn't work. And Ricco actually recommended to me to try my Bach mouthpiece.
In order to know what types of things I should play to test out these rotaries, I picked Micah's brain about that a little bit too.
When I'm testing a rotary trumpet, or any trumpet, I'm looking for a compelling sound, and on a rotary trumpet, I'm going to test that with usually music, because I want to be thinking artistically and thinking musically when I'm testing something. I want to put myself in a sort of a performance state of mind, not a testing state of mind, when I'm trying an instrument. So I'll play licks, passages from the repertoire, and on a rotary trumpet, that might be the Beethoven Lay and Orchels. It might be something from basic from a Beethoven symphony that's arpeggiated and articulated, to just see how that response is and how the sound blooms, and if it speaks in the way that I'm looking for, and if it has dynamic shades of loud to soft, and then I'll test more chromatic passages from Wagner or Bruckner, just a couple little memorized licks, something lyrical, and then I want to kind of test the extremes. I want to see what it's like when I really go for hot and brighter louds, and what the sound does when I want it to be covered and soft. And weich, that German term for soft, like a cloud, like a pillow.
Yeah.
I want to give a huge shout out to my friend Micah for being so willing to give of his wisdom and his knowledge about rotary trumpets so that I could learn, and I hope that you learned from it. Our conversation was so great that I ended up editing the entire conversation together and uploading that on my YouTube channel. So if you want to hear everything Micah has to say about rotary trumpets, you should check that video out, and I'll leave a link in the description so you can find that video. Now that we know what kind of sound I'm looking for on these rotary trumpets, and we have the repertoire we want to use to test, I want to share some recordings with you that I made so you can hear these beautiful Ricco Kühn instruments in action. Overall, I think the response on these trumpets is very comfortable. The feedback behind the horn is a bit different from what I'm used to, and as I listen back, I definitely don't hear the same kind of pop that I've been striving for on my piston trumpet. That being said, the articulation is still very clear, and Micah was right. There is a nice roundness to the sound that's quite attractive. The dynamic range on this instrument seems to be pretty comfortable. I thought the Brahms excerpt had a nice forte sound at the beginning and then a beautiful dolce quality when the dynamic got less about halfway through the excerpt. Playing legato on these instruments isn't very difficult to do, but using rotors instead of piston valves is definitely an adjustment. This excerpt from the fourth movement of Bruckner 7 was definitely the most uncomfortable one for me to play. Upon listening back to the recording, I still think it sounds great, but the feedback I'm used to when playing loud on my piston trumpet wasn't there, and I felt I ended up just forcing the sound more than I needed to. Schumann 2 has been the bane of my existence for a very long time because I have a real tendency to just play it too softly. On my piston trumpet, I've spent a lot of time learning what soft sounds sound like behind the horn, and I've gotten used to that feedback, but it's very different on the rotary. For this type of dynamic extreme, it does seem like the thing for me to focus on would be getting the right sound in my head and then just recording myself a lot until I could reproduce the sound I want, and then started to learn what it felt like to produce that sound. Alright, that's going to be all for this video. I hope that this introduction to rotary trumpets has been helpful for you in learning a little bit more about them, when you would use them, and then how to be more successful when playing them. So I almost forgot to mention these keys right here on the rotary trumpet. These keys will open up a vent hole right here, you can see. And this vent hole makes certain notes significantly easier to play. This top one right here will make things in A flat major easier to play, most notably high C. When you use this on a high C, it's almost like you can't miss it. And then using this lower one right here will help things in A major, like A's on top of the staff. Yeah, it just makes these things quite a bit easier to use. They take a second to learn how to play. They can be a little awkward to manage with your fingers, but once you get used to it, everything is quite a bit easier to do. I have a few other videos I've done for Houghton Horns on their YouTube channel where I reviewed other trumpets, so if you have not seen those, make sure to check those out if you're interested.